People traumatized as kids are known to have difficulty weighing the potential consequences of trauma-driven behaviors that they allow to continue in themselves. And so you might jump into an impossible relationship or stay in a bad relationship or cling to an ex who has told you clearly that they'll never feel that way that you feel, even though they're happy enough to have you on the periphery of their lives. And this is who traumatized people can so easily end up attached to in life. Like they're not quite alone, but they're unable to build the friendships or care for themselves financially or liberate that tremendous talent and ability that's inside because obsessive, clinging, infatuated love for someone who is not able or willing to be your partner, and the word for that is limerence, that kind of obsessive love consumes everything you've got. It's got your joy, it consumes your security and your future. And when you're doing this, it's likely you'll come up with a dozen rationalizations why it's just for now and you know it's not really going anywhere. And you'll tell yourself and everyone that you're actually happy with that tiny little corner of a relationship that you actually secretly want all of. You love them. You want them to give you everything, but you content yourself with just a little bit. You can't build a real life when your heart is pouring energy into a fantasy of what you wish would happen. A life can only be built on what is happening. That has to be taken into account and you build on that. And as hard as it can be to do when you have childhood PTSD, everything depends on facing the truth. That limerence is a parasite. It's sucking the life out of you. So my letter today is from a woman I'll call Jane. And she writes, "Dear Anna, like so many with CPTSD, I haven't had any friendships strong enough to call me out or to even understand really, and I've lost so many friendships because of my CPTSD, so many. Lately, you've been speaking about limerence, and I can see how my situation was exactly that at one time, but I think things have evolved. However, I know to question my judgment, that my discernment might be off a little bit. So I'm writing to ask a question about my current living situation. Here's the background. Nearly 5 years ago, and only a couple years after separating from my ex, I met a man and we began dating. Looking back, it was the firestorm that finally woke me up to the work I needed to do to heal. We triggered each other so hard, it was tragic. He's avoidant, I'm anxious avoidant, and while we really hit it off fast and hard, of course, right? I'm circling it with my fairy pencil because I'm going to read through and then I'll come back to the things I circled so we can talk a little bit more and I'll see if I can help you, Jane. Okay. We really hit it off fast and hard, of course, right? We also kept breaking up, this on-again, off-again thing that probably traumatized me further when I was already a CPTSD mess. About a year into this, my only child attempted suicide. Less than 2 weeks later, my boyfriend dumped me, saying we needed space. I know I was a triggered toxic mess, and I own that now, and I know that a lot of his behavior wasn't cool. Either that he abandoned me in my greatest time of need. I was at the beginning stages of calling people out who were hurting me. I likely wasn't doing a great job of it. We did mend things again a few weeks later, and he apologized, admitting he couldn't handle the huge emotional toll it took, but that he shouldn't have left me hanging like that. We kept doing this, growing, learning, triggering, breaking it off. Long story short, 2 years ago, he said, I don't like how this relationship feels. A few months later, he told me, just friends forever, but continued to keep in touch to check up on me. I was living alone in a tiny cottage on a farm in the woods. He was living alone without much contact at all in the city, all this during the pandemic. We chatted regularly like friends do, but I know I was in limerence then based on everything you've described. I was sure he kept in touch because he still wanted me. I was a total mess over the loss of our love relationship, always looking for hope that we would mend it, always daydreaming of us getting back together, crying all the time, and so on. I realize now I placed a lot of self-worth on being wanted by someone else. Months later, I discovered the place I was at, the farm cottage, had an addicted man living there in an RV, and there was an incident that triggered some old stuff. And this was just as I was learning what triggered meant, what it meant to have my new diagnosis of PTSD. But the power of it terrified me. It shook me to the core. I called my dad in a complete dysregulated mess, and he was busy, so I called the boyfriend, my closest friend and regular confidant. My boyfriend wanted me safe out of there and offered his spare room. Just a note, my stuff is all in storage. I've been going around trying out neat places to live, like the farm, or traveling in my camper, trying to decide where to settle. And some of my things are still at his place, like my bed and dining room table chairs. His spare room, for example, the one he offered me, had my bed set up in it already because I didn't want it in the garage storage. All the rest of my household stuff is in. It was fall, winter weather was coming already, and my camper isn't winterized. I accepted his kind offer at that time, hoping we would grow close, mend our relationship, and the rest would be history. By February, 5 months later, I was finally waking up to the fact that he really meant it. Just friends forever. Although I was still lost in limerence, despite these facts in my face, I found a job and returned to the farm. The drug addict had moved on, and by the end of that summer last year, our friendship was still strong, long distance. My limerence was healing along with all the therapy work I was doing and continue to do. But the job was seasonal, and I hadn't been able to find a permanent place to live. He welcomed me back for the winter once again. Should I mention I had a kitten the first winter that he accepted no problem, and he fell in love with it. Because by that second winter, when I returned to rent the spare room again, he had his own kitten, and now we were a household of 4. Yes, I'm still here in that spare room, paying a very manageable rent. My kitten grown into a cat, and the 2 of them might be a bonded pair now. Meanwhile, there's a housing crisis and war and rising prices, and I haven't been able to secure my own place. Not sure I want to be honest. Living alone again would suck. But am I fooling myself? Am I still in limerence, staying on here like this? I mean, it's not forever. He has plans to retire soon and buy an acreage. I have plans to go traveling again this summer and look for a new place to live. I'm not expecting our relationship to change. I love him deeply still, but as a friend only, I swear. Is it bad for me to stay in contact with him, having that history? I can't imagine not talking to him, not calling him with news of my life, not camping out on his property to help him build his homestead, not asking his advice when I found some place I'd like to acquire. Have we managed to create a valuable friendship, or am I still fooling myself? I recognize our friendship has held us both back from seeking new love relationships. Best wishes, Jane. All right, Jane, I think I can help you. Here we go. Life is complicated, isn't it? Okay. All right. You had a relationship that was limerent, and now you swear you're just friends. So first of all, I'm going to be the friend who does call you out and say, if you didn't have limerence about this guy, you wouldn't have to write about it. That's so mean, right? But I think that's the case. I think you do have limerence for him. I think you're using self-denial as a way to tolerate that you can't have somebody who you love very much. And yes, I believe you have a good friendship. Being limerent doesn't always exclude the truth of having a good friendship. I'll tell you what I think. Let's go through some of this. So you guys had a terrible trauma bond relationship, and that's not uncommon for people who were traumatized as kids. And it's interesting, 2 avoidant people going into trauma bond. Trauma bond is when 2 people break up, get back together, break up, get back together, or one person, messes with the other person's mind, is like, I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you. It sounds like it was kind of a mutual thing. So that will actually, even to somebody who didn't have trauma, that will addict someone's brain to the high of getting back together after a breakup. So you have the pain of the breakup and the abandonment, and then the high of getting back together. And sometimes it gets to be so entrenched that you can't even feel feelings for each other without doing that. But it sounds like you guys are middle-aged, and so you know better than to, keep it at this high fever pitch of drama. And so you're finding this kind of happy medium of being roommates together part of the year, even though it's blocking you both from having another relationship. This thing where he couldn't deal with, first of all, I'm so sorry that your only child attempted suicide. It sounds like they survived, thank goodness. And the years of the pandemic have been terrible for young people. And I'm so sad for anybody who starts to feel that badly, and so glad they survived. And so, of course, you were very upset. And I think it is fair, if you're sleeping with somebody and you're living with them and you're with them long term, it is fair that they should be there for you when your life has a big bad thing happen in it like that. And if they can't be there for you, it's just a matter of deciding, like, are you okay with that? So you say he's like a avoidant, and that's what avoidants do, right? They don't like intense emotion. They hit the high road when they do that. Although a lot of them, they know that they're not supposed to do that, and so they go through the motions of sticking around. But being with an avoidant person can be a very hard and disappointing thing. Now, you say you're avoidant too, so what's interesting about that is, in a way, it's a perfect relationship for two avoidants. You know, if you got to a point where you were just to say, no, I'm really clear, I can't actually deal with a real relationship and I don't want to pursue it anymore. I just want to have this roommate who I kind of adore, and we have our cats, and I go away every summer, so it's not too much. You know, that could in a way be the perfect arrangement, but here's the thing. You're not building up a financially secure situation that from middle age into old age is going to be so important. And so I think that's the thing about limerent relationships, is they keep you off in dreamland and you're not dealing with important practical questions like that. Like, married people can help each other do that. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but it's a real advantage for, saving and growing old together. Single people who just are consciously single can focus on saving money for that, and not, you said this was a seasonal job. A seasonal job is not a good job for somebody who's headed for retirement. I mean, unless there's some wealth coming your way in the future. But right now, with you can't afford to even have your own place and you're living in a camper, it sounds like you're right on the edge. And I would say, for a person with trauma to keep themselves on the edge like that, you're always going to be terribly dependent on relationships, whether they're miserable or not. And there's the possibility he's going to meet somebody and then it will become necessary for you to go. So I'm just, I'm not really telling you what you have to do about this. Like, you guys could agree to accept this, but if I were your friend, I would just be very worried about your financial security and want you to deal with that. And also that you had a support system outside of him, so that you didn't rely on somebody who's avoidant and can't deal with your feelings. And if anything bad ever happens in your life, is going to just run out the door on you and possibly get into a new relationship. So that is a strong suggestion I have for you: support system, financial security. What's going on here, what I notice is it's, and I talk about this sometimes, when the child in you is controlling the adult in you. It sounds like the child in you needs to be taken care of right now. But it's not proper to have an ex do that for you. It's fraught with difficulties. It's going to activate your trauma, and it's got the limerence going. And once limerent, it's always right under the surface. You might think it's not there, but it is. It's there. I think very few people ever recover from limerence. What I've heard is the one thing that can do it sometimes is actually getting together with somebody, and then you're dealing with the real thing of being with them and all the disappointments that being with a real person also contain. It's very hard to stay in this fantasy of them, of how great it would be, because you're actually in whatever it is. And something to remember, the relationship that you have with him, that is your relationship with him. So it's very easy to get attached to a hypothetical relationship. But what is the relationship is playing out always in real time in front of us, in all the relationships we're in. You get to see, this is what it looks like. A friend of mine used to say, if you want to know about a relationship, take a trip. Just because when you take a trip, it starts to, pop the bubbles of illusion about what might be, and you're thrown together maybe in a car, for several days, and you get to experience what's that like, what is so annoying about them. So now you've lived with him. You guys are good friends. It just sounds like either it's that he's not in love with you, or he's so avoidant that he cannot be in that kind of relationship. But the fact that he calls and stays in touch, yeah, it seems like he's happy enough to have you be on the periphery of his life. And that's often the case. So if you're okay with that forever, with a lot of risks that you're going to get thrown out one day, go for it. I'm being mean. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to show you the dark side of this. But also to let you know there's total acceptance of this. It's an okay life arrangement. Many, many people don't end up in couples. Many, many people have dear friends who they really kind of stay tied to, and that becomes their sort of chosen family. It's just that the limerence could lead to a great soul emptiness for you. And I would hate for you at the end of your life, when you're reviewing everything, just go, God, I wish I had actually found myself a real partner. so that you could have all the joys that come with a real partner. And instead of a roommate where you have all the downsides, but not the joys, right? I think about that winter where you had to go live with him because the winter was coming in your van, and you live in a snowy area far north. I don't want that to happen to you. There needs to be another alternative for that. So maybe what you're doing is rationalizing going to him as if there's no other place in the world, but actually you could go to a city, or you could, rent a room, or if you really had to, go to a shelter. There would always be an option for that, but just please stay in touch with your options on this. If the relationship isn't what you want it to be, if it's not something that you're free to commit your whole life to, which it's not right now, certainly. And it doesn't seem like it's going to turn to that. You say, I realize now I placed a lot of worth on being wanted by someone else. You know what? I don't hear you doing that to a fault. Everybody wants to be loved by somebody else. I don't think you're doing it to a fault. I think limerence crops up when real life is just not very good. And especially when childhood wasn't very good and real life is sort of like, sad, and there's not enough friends, there's not enough money, there's not enough love. We want to escape into the fantasy of what might be. That's all it is. It's an escape into fantasy. But like all addictions, it keeps you from doing active things that make your life good. Developing your skills, learning to play the guitar, having a better job, making sure you have something saved for retirement, having a warm place to go in the winter just in case, things don't go very well here. You talk about being a dysregulated mess. You were very hard on yourself about how upset you were, and about when you went back and lived in the RV thing with the addict guy, and you were triggered and you learned about it and you called your dad and he wasn't there, and that's when you called your ex. I totally get it. You were in a vulnerable place, and he was just like the only person who represents security to you, who represents like a shoulder, a hand. I get it. This is why it's sort of an unstable arrangement. But many of us have such people in our lives. That's how we get through. He offered you a spare room. All your stuff is in storage. The fact that your stuff was still in his house, you guys have been entangled this whole time, right? So that thing where you break up all the time and get back together, I don't know. It just seems like if you could find a way to make it stable and commit to it and like see each other through to the end of life, it could work. And if you were okay that it's not sex and, all that, it could work. I see that there's a lot here. And now the cats, and now you say the cats have a pair bond. And so that's where it's like the cat thing, yeah, but that's where I knew you had limerence going on. It's like the cats are pair bonded. We have to be together. That sounds like a limerent thought. I know cats bond, but that doesn't mean you can't take your cat and go. Yeah, and the world is pretty scary right now. And who doesn't want to have a secure home where they can stay and know that they're going to be okay and somebody will help them? And what if you break your leg? And, you want all that. Of course you want that. And you can't imagine life without him and not talking to him and talking about news and staying on his property and helping him build his homestead. So, yeah, you want to be able to ask his advice when you make big things. So, I don't know, maybe you're making it work. You didn't tell me. Have you completely laid your cards on the table and just say, look, I love you and I can't imagine life without you, and is there some way we can make this work? Because I would like to be together with you for real. Has that conversation happened? I'm guessing it has, but if it hasn't, please lay all your cards on the table. Go ahead and get the honest answer from him. And, maybe, I don't want to give you false hope. It's just that I don't know. But if there's hope here about how you can keep this relationship okay, I think it needs to include monogamy. That's just what I think. I think you're not going to be okay if he sees somebody else, and his new person isn't going to be okay with you there. I don't know, but people who love you and who are your friend like that, they're hard to find. I see what you mean. You don't want to just throw out the baby with the bathwater. Sometimes it's a sign. Sometimes it's a sign that it really is a partnership when you can't imagine life without them. And some of us, I've answered letters recently from people who were in relationships that there was the young lady who was with a guy who didn't do housework, and so many people are like, oh, that's terrible, dump him. And I'm like, from where I sit, when you have severe PTSD, and in that letter, she had been in an orphanage till 8 months, and it had affected her ability to attach. And so it was difficult to attach and show love. To me, when love shows up and people really love and care for each other, it's a wonderful thing. And sometimes it's worth being somewhat flexible to preserve it. So if you can do that, Jane, if you can find a way to take care of yourself and find a way to make this tenuous, push me, pull you relationship kind of hold on and be okay. The trick with avoidance is you can't come rushing at them with a lot of emotion. Sometimes they can process information more slowly and you put a little distance with them. And so it's possible that with some healing your CPTSD, you could be able to be a little bit more self-contained. We use the daily practice around here. That's how I stay self-contained, because I'm married to somebody who's a lot more avoidant than I am, and that's how we do it. He has to work overtime to try to make sure he doesn't like walk out the door when I'm emoting. I have to make sure I don't emote like crazy. I have to kind of limit it for him. I can communicate, but that's how it works for us. You meet in the middle. You said, though, you told me that you were waking up to the fact like he means it, friends forever. So, you know what I'd like you to do, Jane? Get back to us in 6 months at the end of the summer. Let us know what happens. I want to know what happens with you. I feel like there's too much going on to say, oh, run, get out of there. There's too much going on here. And I fear that I'm giving you false hope in the whole thing. But you asked. So as your faraway friend on the internet, that's what I want to say. It's like, I feel like this could be a very special thing. And especially because I know your kid is going through a hard time. I want you to be safe. I want you to be supported. And you know they have a lot of online 12-step meetings now so that you can have a place to heal that's free. You can have, because if you're going to go live in the country here, you're going to need online meetings, right? But it's free. You'll have friends there. You could maybe have a sponsor and somebody to call when your emotions are strong so that what you end up communicating is a little bit filtered down. If it doesn't work out with him, then the 12-step program is still your support and your foundation so that you always have a community everywhere you go and people to help and advise you with all those things you were hoping to have from him. It's so hard to leave a relationship with someone who is making an effort to make you happy and to convince you to stay. And if you're someone with abandonment wounds from your childhood, leaving feels even harder. It's hard to think, it's hard to see straight, it's hard to trust your judgment. But when you know there are deal breaker problems, or when there are important things missing from the relationship that you know in your heart that you need and deserve, then it could be time to break up properly. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Charlotte, and she's in the middle of realizing her relationship needs to end, but she doesn't know how to actually pull the trigger. And she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm 36 years old, and I have a wonderful child from a previous marriage. My childhood was riddled with multiple abandonments, losses, neglect, and poverty. As an adult, I spent 4 years in therapy, new age woo-woo, and all of the above without much relief, so I'm grateful to finally know recovery is possible. Since I've been watching your videos and doing the daily practice techniques that you teach, my relationship with my partner, which was previously on the rocks, started to improve. I can't tell if the partnership has become unhealthy because my CPTSD has me so triggered and emotionally out of control around some of his behavior, or if his behavior was simply toxic. We have a long history. We've been good friends for almost 20 years since I was in high school. He was also my limerent lover. I always irrationally dreamt of being with him. We were never really together as a couple until I divorced my ex-husband. My ex turned out to have a sex addiction and was emotionally and financially abusive, so there was a lot of pain and suffering during our 8-year marriage. He didn't want to let me go and made various threats about killing himself, taking away our son, and making sure I would have nothing if I left the marriage. It took 2 separate tries and 6 months of serving papers, restraining orders, and a lot of drama to finally escape. This was when my old limerent friend appeared like a knight in shining armor, helping me to leave the marriage. Let's call him Mark. We have experienced a lot of good things together these past 4 years, but we've also had some problems. In particular, his secretive behavior surrounding communication with girls on social media and dating apps. I even found out he cheated early on in our relationship. He's in the military and was unexpectedly deployed about the time my divorce became official. I think he was unsure that I would be able to follow through on the divorce. I kept him in my gray zone because it was a very scary and unstable time. This is when he was with other women and unfortunately was not forthcoming about it. I had been told that we were exclusive, and he was very clear that he wanted a marriage, life, and future together. When he came back from the deployment, we started over. He would often claim he couldn't love me or anyone, though he also said he wanted to be together exclusively. He said he didn't want a marriage anymore, but seems to still want all the benefits of a marriage, which was confusing to me. We have shared a life as partners who share household chores and responsibilities. We help each other with family, friends, work, and dreams. I should also add that he's extremely generous with me and my child. I now understand I ran from one relationship to another without fixing my deep childhood trauma wounds. I also realize I was convincing myself that I didn't need marriage or a formal commitment, partly because Mark didn't want those things, and partly because my first marriage didn't work out. Since I started becoming healthy and establishing boundaries, he suddenly announced he quit social media, which had been a huge source of a lot of our drama. He's suddenly been stepping up in how he shows up, and he said he would put me on the title of his house that we now live in lieu of marriage. After my recent work on my own CPTSD through your channel, I've discovered that I do indeed crave a committed, stable, healthy, and loving marriage that would benefit my son too. There is still a part of me that wants another child too. Mark has been on the fence about this until recently, but has since clearly stated he doesn't want any children of his own. I made a bold move a few months ago and moved out to my own place with my son. Still, it's been very hard to actually break up. The more I get well and distance, the more Mark appears to get well and come closer. His offer to put me on the house's title in lieu of marriage was shocking. It was something that I had asked for a while ago, which he refused then. He has showed more effort in connecting with my son the last few months too. It's very confusing. He still refuses to go to therapy together. Still, I can't come to trust him for doing what he did. I've asked for a break and it's been at least 3 weeks, but he keeps weaving himself back into our lives and saying he loves us. But the fact is, he hasn't put much effort into spending time with my son in the past. They, in general, like each other. They're respectful with each other. But Mark is afraid of getting attached to my son, he says. He won't even play ball with him for a few minutes. At first, he had asked that I don't pressure him and allow a relationship to develop naturally. But 4 years have gone by, and clearly Mark avoids my son. I have seen the sadness in my son, hoping to connect with Mark, and eventually my son just stopped trying. I'm a devoted mom. I have an interesting career and lots of loving friends around me. They're all saying not to give this guy another chance. I don't know how to say these words to break up. There is a part of me that fears I'm giving up my best friend and my one true love. You've given me hope that perhaps one day I can be mostly healed and have a partner who would love to be a good role model to my child. If you could help me put together some of those words so I can hear them and practice them, it would be so helpful. I keep finding myself explaining why I'm not happy, and he then jumps in to fix it. How do you break up with your best friend of 20 years who was a limerent lover who became a pretty good partner? How do you know if enough is enough? How would the fairy break up? What does it look like in action? Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing my work here under your guidance. All right, Charlotte. I got your back here. I see that this is a tough one. You know, he's not terrible. He's not abusive. But this thing where he said he really wanted a marriage and then he came back from his deployment and he said he didn't want that. You know, being on the title of the house, that's nice and everything, but it's not marriage. It's not the same thing. Saying he doesn't want to bond with your son, having 4 years to do it and not doing it. The writing's on the wall. And you know what kind of the clincher for me was? That your friends all see it. Your friends are like, don't give him another chance. This thing about the online girls, I suppose maybe it ended and maybe that was a gray zone period. I don't know. He lied to you about it and he doesn't want to go to therapy. I'm just hearing from you, like, whatever he's done, it wasn't enough to satisfy you that something was different. And in fact, since then, like, I don't know, things got a little worse. So it's not uncommon that when you pull apart from somebody and take some distance, they would try to come back and draw you back in. He's a person. He's attached to you. He doesn't want you to leave. That's understandable. So he's trying to get you back, but he's not doing what needs to be done. And in fact, if you were to leave him and he took that as a sign like, okay, now he's got to change his tune. He's got to ask you to marry him and all that. You wouldn't really want him to do that out of fear. You know, you would want I agree with you. I think that you are someone totally capable and deserving of being with somebody who's really excited to have a marriage with you, to have a family with you, maybe another kid, to be a stepdad to your son. Those are really important goals. And the way your son feels sad and let down, that's your kind of litmus test. You know, what's good for the kids is good for us. And when you see your kids sad about the way they're treated by your partner, how are you going to possibly feel better than that, right? So I think you're making a good call. It's a sad one. You know, this guy's not like the devil or anything. It's just not what you need. So here are my tips for a clean, minimally painful breakup, you know, as not painful as it can be, with someone who's not abusive. And of course, that would be different with somebody who was. But this is how to break up with somebody when it's someone you care about, but they're just not the one for you. Okay? So first, tell him that you have something important to talk about and ask him to meet you. You've been with him long enough that this should definitely be an in-person conversation. And the best place to meet is in a public place where no one can make a scene. Not so public that there's no privacy, but public so that, you know, you can safely exit the conversation after a fairly short period of time. So a coffee shop would be good, a park is good, a restaurant is too long, you have to wait for a lot of stuff to come to the table and pay for it, and you may want to make your exit before then. So you could even meet at a bus stop, but I don't know, that's a bit sad. You want to be somewhere where other people are around, but they can't hear you unless you raise your voice. So the other person, in this case Mark, will probably have an idea where the conversation's going if you're like, you know, meet me in a coffee shop, I need to talk to you. And when you do sit down and talk to them, you can let them know right away in the conversation that you're breaking up with them. That's the first thing to say. Don't, you know, drag the conversation out or mislead them. You do need to give them a reason, but I recommend only giving the minimal amount of information so that they can understand why. Now, in the long run, it will help them to know why, and people deserve to know why, but it doesn't need to be every painful detail of how little we think of them, right? So in every way possible, this is assuming the person has acted in good faith, just avoid criticizing, blaming, or shaming the other person. For example, if the problem were that you're physically repulsed by a person, that's not what you said, but I'm just saying something that's so hurtful. You don't have to say that. In something like that, you can say that, you know, the match just doesn't feel right. You're looking for a relationship where that rightness is very clear. You should be kind, but be clear. So Charlotte, you asked me for the words that you could use to break up with Mark. So I'll tell you how you might express the reasons in the way that you told me. Okay, so it goes like this. Mark, I've decided I need to end our relationship. And I know that's hard. And I know you've done a lot to try to make me happy, and I really appreciate that. I've realized, though, that I never really recovered, trust-wise, from what happened early in our relationship with the other women online. And what I know about myself is, if I'm ever going to be in a relationship, it has to have a full commitment, a marriage, not just because of that commitment to me, but a commitment to my son. And I may want to have another kid someday in the future, and I know that's not what you want. So you've been so generous with us, and you've been my best friend for 20 years, but I know in my heart that being a couple is not right for us. So Charlotte, then, when it comes to seeing each other in the future, I'd suggest that you don't leave it open-ended, even if it seems like this will make it easier. When you say goodbye, it's okay to give him a hug, but make it just a quick and cool hug. You know, don't send mixed signals with the way that you show concern for his feelings. You care about him, but you're no longer going to be taking care of him. So don't let this conversation last more than, say, 20 or 30 minutes. And after the information is out there, you know, let him say a thing or two, but lingering on this is only going to open the door for the hurt feelings to start welling up and coming out, and it could get yucky. So you've said your piece. He's had a chance to say something. Trust that he's going to be able to handle the experience and take care of himself after you've parted. Now, you could offer to have a phone conversation with him in a week or two and set a time to do it. When you have that call, have a friend at your house with you to help you keep the call boundaried and under 20 minutes long, and not have it veer into how you're going to be friends now or work it out. If you want to break up, you need to let this be the real thing. So don't agree to get together in person. Don't get sucked into taking care of him or negotiating some kind of friendship. And don't tell him flat out that you don't intend to be friends. You can say something like, for now, I need time apart so that I can heal from this too. And that's true. You know, who knows? Maybe in the future you could have contact again. Don't give in and offer him hope. Don't make plans for the future. Over time, this clean ending will help both of you to move on. Now, if he has stuff at your house or vice versa, I suggest you make a time and ask him to have your things ready for you, and then go with a friend and be quick and polite. Don't engage with him about anything other than getting your stuff. A clean ending means you do not ghost them. You communicate directly, you give them your reasons, you express your concern, but when it's done, you don't call them, you don't text them, you don't invite them to gatherings, and if you know they're going to be at a gathering, don't go. Not for a while anyway, not until you're really not connected to them anymore. Don't email them, don't stay in touch with their family. It takes self-discipline, but if this person is not your true love, then getting out is a big step toward true love for you, Charlotte. Not away from true love, you're going toward true love. Now you are available. And you being out of that unhappy and unfulfilling relationship is going to start to feel really good soon, even if it means being single for a while. And when one day you find yourself happy and loved the way you want to be loved, you're going to only wish that you got out of that old relationship even sooner. Few things in relationships can drain your energy and your personal power like narcissistic abuse. By definition, when a cult leader controls and brainwashes people who fall under their spell, it's called narcissistic abuse. And so many good, intelligent people are vulnerable to that, to someone taking charge of their life in a way that it feels great at first, like it solves all your problems, but then it turns into a soul-sucking nightmare. And the same thing can happen in relationships. The luring in, it's going to be great, then the deprivation, the mindfuckery, the introduction of greater and greater emotional abuse. At that point, a vital sense of self-interest, your instinct for self-preservation can be so damaged, you can't imagine leaving. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Freya, and she writes, "Hey Anna, I would like to ask for your help because this situation has been dragging on for so long. I'm 23 years old and just enrolled in university. I have CPTSD from an emotionally unavailable, strict mother and an alcoholic father who cheated on my mother. I met a guy almost 2 years ago when I was in a very vulnerable period in my life. I was having frequent panic attacks. I was jobless because of that and was living with a friend at that time. The guy came as a, quote, savior. It felt like he dragged me out of the mud. We started dating only after 2 months. He encouraged me to apply for university, get better habits, see a therapist, stop smoking, and even have a better relationship with God, as we're both Christian. It was all good until about 6 months into the relationship. I started feeling overpowered. Like what I said did not matter. My needs getting frequently dismissed, such as asking for more affection, validation. I played the cool girl, but got tired of it very quickly. My partner wouldn't kiss me. He would reject hugs even, saying it was for my own benefit. He felt like my need for affection was unhealthy. I felt like a parent and a child simultaneously, being guilt-tripped into doing chores for him, such as cleaning or washing the dishes, because he had eczema, but being treated as a child, always told what to do. I felt like my voice, my opinions did not matter. He said it was unhealthy for me to wear makeup or drink coffee, and he would pick fights over those things. After a year into the relationship, he ended up breaking up with me, saying I was too obsessed with the idea of the relationship, and I'm too immature to be in one. I asked for no contact, but he wanted me to stay close, and I submitted, hoping we might be together one day. He said he would not want the advances of other girls and only did this to help me and better our friendship. But I found out he messaged a girl some sexual things after a friend of his warned me about some strange messages he and the girl exchanged on social media. He tried to deny it, but after I talked to the girl myself, it was very clear to me he pretended to be someone he wasn't. They did exchange sexual messages, and that moment, I was done.
I blocked him everywhere and avoided physical contact as well. Since then, he tried reaching out from multiple numbers, apologizing, saying he has found new faith. It was the first time he said I was beautiful. He said he loved me, wants me, and only me, and that he was not connected to his heart. After not talking for weeks, he showed up in my hometown uninvited. He brought me a cake he made for me and brought me other very personal gifts. I caught feelings again. I caught feelings. Like catching an STD. Oh. But later on, he told me he doesn't want a relationship for now. After he told me that, I cut contact again. He reached out from a new number, trying to tell me I'm wrong for damaging my heart like this, that I can't forgive and that I will cause myself hurt in the future. I just want this to end. I cannot seem to let him go 100%, even though I feel this is not real love. How do I know I'm making the right decision? I feel like I'm in his grip or under a spell. Thank you in advance. Freya. Okay, Freya. I had my fairy pencil. I was circling things I wanted to come back to as I read through. I'm so glad you wrote. And there it is. You want to know, did you make the right decision? Yes, and I'll tell you why. It's been dragging on. You're 23 years old. You just enrolled in university. You have CPTSD, emotionally unavailable, strict mother, alcoholic father, cheated on your mother. Sounds like just lies and no mirroring of presence of like helping you understand what feelings and perceptions mean. They damaged your perception. They primed you. They made you vulnerable for exactly what has happened, okay? So you were having frequent panic attacks. You had no job because of that. You were living with a friend. So very vulnerable. Now, I wrote down a list of vulnerable characteristics. This is a good time to read them. So I've been thinking a lot about cult leaders and spiritual abuse. And I know, like, this guy, I think it is spiritual abuse. He was using the sort of Christianity thing. But whatever it is, whatever you call it, he tried to hang it on 20 different hooks. Very interesting, but not cool. I don't diagnose anybody, but he just seems like bullet point, textbook, Wikipedia, narcissist who's a psychopath. Everything seems manipulation. So I can't diagnose, but those of you who comment, you can say anything you want, so you go for it. Please help Freya know what this is so she knows what to do some research on. Okay, so I got this list from Spiritual Abuse Resources, and they're an organization. You can find them online. These are the vulnerable characteristics that make somebody an easy target for narcissistic abuse and or spiritual abuse, okay? So it's someone who is under stress, which you were having panic attacks. In transition, you were jobless, you didn't have a direction in your life yet, tend toward dependency, you were living towards friends, and so you were very young and you hadn't really gotten to that point where you were independent yet. Tend toward dependency, unassertive, gullible, want simple answers to complex questions. A lot of these are characteristics of youth. Are attracted to trance-like states of mind, are unaware of how groups can manipulate people, have recently had a traumatic experience, are unaware of how the mind and body can affect each other, lack skills in critical thinking and logic, and lack knowledge about methods of deception. So I just thought I'd share that with you because I was thinking a lot about that list. I've been planning to make a video about it, but I'm, doing my research. But I thought I'd just pull out that list because, Freya, I just hear it in your story. That you were vulnerable. It's not your fault you were vulnerable. I mean, the minute people don't get taken care of properly as children, it sets you up for this kind of thing. So the really positive thing is you're out right now, you're asking for input, you're asking for advice. This is all really positive things. Yes, you can heal. It takes vigilance, it takes persistence, but you can do it. He came along, this guy, as a savior. Classic narcissist move. And it felt like he dragged you out of the mud. And when you were in the mud, so any kind of love and attention would have felt that way, right? And of course, when we look at somebody we're newly dating as a savior and it's going to solve all of our problems, it does set us up for grave disappointment because nobody can really do that. A relationship can be a positive thing and it can introduce a whole new set of friends and a purpose in life and totally good things. I don't deny that. But when you were in the mud and suddenly everything's been solved, vulnerable, okay. Healthy people will not try to convince you that they're the solution to all your problems either. So you got into a relationship, you were dating within 2 months, and he encouraged you to do these positive things: apply to university, get better habits, see a therapist, stop smoking, have a better relationship with God. It was all good until about 6 months into the relationship. So whatever, I could only, you guys who are out there in the comments section, you can tell me the significance of 6 months, but I just think it's when sexual interest wears off and the really nasty side, there's no holds barred anymore. There's nothing for them to get from you. Just the need to control somebody else and to feed off that energy. All right, so you started feeling overpowered, and I get it from what you said. What you said didn't matter. Your needs were frequently dismissed. If you asked for more affection or validation, no. You played the cool girl, and I love that term. We're going to have shirts here one day that say ex-cool girl, acting like, oh, that's fine. I don't need affection and validation. Yeah, that's needy. That's pathetic, or whatever he was telling you. He said he wouldn't give that to you. No hugs, no kisses. It was for your own benefit because your need for affection was unhealthy. Oh my gosh, that's where I say mindfuckery. What does that even mean? It was unhealthy to need that. I think it was inconvenient because, I'm gonna just, spoiler alert, like what's with all the phone numbers, okay? Something very nefarious is going on here. Felt like a child and a parent simultaneously, guilt-tripped into doing all his chores. That's a very cult leader thing. That's how you show your loyalty. And then treated as a child where he told you what to do. You felt like your voice and your opinions didn't matter. Well, he tried to make them that way, but they do matter. So you were made to feel that way, and because you were vulnerable and he was manipulative, and that's where it goes. But it's not true. So I just want to say that, for any credence that you give me, your voice and your opinions totally matter, and I'm so glad you're getting them back enough to say what happened here. He said it was unhealthy to wear makeup or drink coffee. What the heck? And he would pick fights over those things. Okay, that's like crazy controlling. After a year in the relationship, he broke up, saying you were too obsessed with the idea of a relationship. Oh my gosh, that's like classic sleeping with other people and lying that it's somehow good rhetoric. He said you were too immature to be in one. Yeah, blame you. You're young, so in a way, I give him no, he's not right about this, but just that, none of us are perfectly formed for relationships. And so, especially in early 20s, weird stuff happens when we grew up with trauma. We often don't have the boundaries or the discernment and can't see the red flags and get very confused when people are abusive to us. Like, did I cause that? That's what we do, but that's why we're here, because we're healing from that. Okay. So you asked for no contact, but he wanted me to stay close, and you submitted. That word submit, ouch. Hoping we might be together one day. Okay, so yeah, you were in a deep trauma bond. I hope he comes around and loves me, I know. And he said he would not want the advances of other girls. And I don't want that with other girls. He just does that with other girls. And you found out he messaged, sexual stuff. Some friend warned you and you saw it. And when you heard it was other girls, like, for whatever reason, you couldn't have a boundary and the self-esteem to realize that everything that had happened up to that point was terrible. But the fact that he lied to you about another girl, that was finally what snapped you out of it. So good. Thank you, other girl. Thank you. Thank you for existing and for making it clear to our friend Freya here that this was not good. That was the thing that was clear to you. And it's interesting because there was that, like, your dad cheated on your mom thing, and it's just weird how sometimes the karma of the stuff we witnessed and suffered from as a child comes back and repeats. And that's what we're doing in recovery is, we're just sort of breaking the repetition, not by just going, I'm so bad, I repeat it, I'm going to decide not to repeat it. It's so subtle the way it creeps in. And it creeps in, I've found, through the very minute, little fearful and resentful thoughts that become beliefs that start driving the trauma-driven decisions and behavior that carries us down the road of ruin, frankly. I don't mean to be Victorian about it, but my CPTSD symptoms ruined my life until I began to use these techniques to really get to those very subtle little thoughts and just keep moving them out, keep moving them out. Those techniques I call the daily practice. It's a free course that's always down below in the description section. Also on the free tools page of my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com. If you want to take that, 500 people sign up for it a day. It's really popular. Come join us. See if it works, okay? So you blocked him everywhere and avoided physical contact. I laughed a little bit. It's not funny, but if you block somebody on social media, I hope you avoided physical contact. So you were trying to have no contact. And I know how hard that is for somebody who's been trauma bonded and who's been neglected in childhood. That kind of a boundary and the loneliness that's coming up, even when you're blocking somebody who abuses you, it can be so compelling that you just break your own boundaries, because you can't bear it. But you're doing it. Okay. And then once you blocked him, he tried reaching out from multiple numbers. I just circled that a bunch of times. It's like multiple numbers. What's going on? He has burner phones for something, for shady business, or for having different relationships with different people. I mean, that would explain why your emotional feelings for him were a problem, a problem for him. And he apologized, saying he found new faith. I'm just guessing like that's what you were hoping to hear. Of course he clocked what it is that you wanted to hear, and he said those things. And it was the first time he said you were beautiful. Oh God, trauma bonding. You were with a guy a year and he never said that, and then he says it and you're like, wait, maybe it's love now. I totally get it. Of course, when we read it out loud, you can see, of course not, it's manipulation. And this is called hoovering, by the way, when a narcissist just, they just like, everything that you ever wanted to hear, and suck you back into their orbit, right? And it worked a little bit. And he said he loved you and you're the only one for him. And at the time, all that bad stuff happened because he wasn't connected to his heart. I just would lay money that those are the words that you used when you were saying what hurt you about it. So he parroted it back to you. I suspect he has no idea what those feelings are or what it means. He's just saying what you're supposed to say to get Freya to put down her boundaries. Then you didn't talk to him. You still had a boundary. Then he comes to your town with a cake. A man who made a cake. How irresistible is that? I totally get it. He's wearing you down, right? And personal gifts. So that phrase, I chuckled the first time. I caught feelings again. And I think that maybe where you live, that's just a way it's said, like, I would say, like, I started having feelings again, but I caught feelings. It just sounds like a disease, and it is in this case. It's like a virus that just got in there and made you think thoughts like this is a good idea. I've had that virus. But later, then he said, guess what? He doesn't want a relationship. So he did all that. You sort of opened up to him. No, he doesn't want one for now. For now, bookmark placed there. And then he told you that, so you cut contact again. Then he used a new telephone number. This guy just cracks me up. What's with all the numbers? Somebody in the audience is going to tell us here in the comments, like, what's with all the numbers? What's he actually doing? And he's trying to tell you that you're wrong for damaging your own heart like this. What, by cutting him off? That you can't forgive, that's your problem, right? And that you'll cause yourself hurt in the future. And I just want, he's grasping at straws to find a way to like, try to get you to let him in again. And saying basically anything, no matter how hurtful. And you just want it to end. Okay, we're gonna help you do that. You haven't let him go 100%, and that's what we do. We cannot let go of the hope, especially when it's just been all like it's just been so worked up in us, like, I want that love, and you don't get it, and then you're given a little crumb, and you're like, yes, I'm getting a crumb, I think the whole cake is coming again, but it's not coming. The cake is taken away, and every time you're given this tiny little thing, it's taken away, and it wears down your will, your spirit, your confidence, your self-esteem, your boundaries, and that is the goal. That's what he wants. He wants somebody just who's all effed up, and so he can just like, this is a figure of speech, but he's drinking your blood. He's an emotional vampire, all right? So you say, I can't let go even though I feel this is not real love. And I'm just going to say understatement of the year. It's not even fake love. This is like some sort of terrible terrible exploitation of a person, and only because you were neglected and abused as a kid, only because of that could you possibly crap fit this into thinking, well, it's something like love. It's nothing like love. Love, by definition, is somebody who cares about the best for you. I wanted to share with you a resource here. If you're wondering if you made the right decision, Richard Grannon, who is on YouTube, who talks about CPTSD a lot, his thing is narcissistic abuse. I really encourage you, go check out his channel. I'll put a link down below in the description section. He has a new book out called A Cult of One. And I heard that title and I bought it immediately, and it's on its way. It just makes so much sense, and that's what it sounds like you were in, a cult of one. This dude is, you know, it's brainwashing, it's mind control, it's exploitation, it's everything like being in a cult. And Richard Grannon says he had to choose a word for who, if the other person is a narcissistic abuser, what am I? And I just wanted to quote from his book here. He says, I chose the term codependent. In using this term, I'm going a little beyond the boundaries of the way it's typically used. When I use the term codependent, I mean a person who is traumatized and brainwashed into needing to be a slave to abusive, psychopathic, narcissistic, tyrannical types of people and systems in order to feel in any way meaningful, visible, or alive. And then you had a couple of half relationships with guys who didn't treat you right, and you got sick of it. And you took space for 6 months and went to counseling for a couple years, and then you stopped feeling guilt for the sexual abuse. High five. That's good. That's very good. And then your dad died of alcoholism 8 years ago, and you had an aunt die of it. And you met your now husband after the last counseling appointment, and I circled that because I'm like, if there was ever a time when you should stay in counseling, it's when you get into a relationship. Okay? So I just also had a question for you. Did you leave counseling when you met him because A, you were worried the counselor would disapprove, or your CPTSD thought, oh, everything's great now? And I'm not making fun because I've totally been that person where, you know, like I work on myself and then somebody new comes along and instantly I would drop it, you know, and just be like, my problem is solved right now. So I could just be projecting on you. So then you got into yoga. You were clean, you were doing yoga. It was the best you ever felt, yay. And you got into the spiritual stuff, as you call it. And you met him on a dating app, and it was really great at first. And after, you say you slept together too fast, okay, a lot of people do. And then you got married after a year. And that was 3 years ago. So then you keep having these huge arguments. You think he has CPTSD and he was taught to stuff his feelings and act like everything's fine. Yeah, some people have that style, and it's okay. It's okay to be that way. That's his style, not yours, okay? His mom has some mental disorder. He can't think of the name. He still feels responsible for her and sends her money. And you're really annoyed about that because she wastes the money and ends up with no food. I know what that's like when a relative is, I've had it with a relative, not a spouse, but they're spending money on somebody. I don't know, anytime you're trying to help somebody who, I guess she has a mental disorder. I understand, though, that he wants to help her. He wants her to have adequate money and he wants her to have food, and yet she doesn't pull it together. So I'm just sort of saying, I sympathize with you, but I also sympathize with him on that. And then you have this premenstrual dysphoria disorder, and it's really bad. You can't get support for it. It's holding you back, and you don't want to take medication because you took antidepressants before. And I really don't know about that. I can't give you any advice about that. I know that, yeah, a lot of people have a negative reaction to drugs and they don't want to do it that way. But if it's holding down your life that much, you've got to do something. And I'm not an expert on this PMDD, but I have a feeling that right now you're not really pursuing solutions for that as fully as you might, as fully as would be in your best interest, okay? And then you guys started a business, and that is a really hard thing for a couple to do, let alone a couple who's newly sober, who does not appear to, you didn't say anything about either one of you being in any kind of program of recovery. So that to me is like double red flag. I've had a lot of alcoholics and addicts in my life, and if they're not in a program recovery, even if they're in a program of recovery, they're vulnerable, they're volatile, they have a lot of healing to do. It can be hard to be in a relationship relationship with them, there's a lot of ground to cover before somebody who's had an alcohol or drug problem, including you, is really capable of like a steady, mature relationship. That is mostly what I hear going on here. Your husband sounds depressed. It sounds like he, the ADHD and growing up, what you think is CPTSD, he's sleeping a lot. I don't know what that is. Is that drugs? Is it depression? I don't know. But you're not happy. You married somebody optimistically who's turned out not to be somebody you respect or like. That's what's basically going on here. I just encourage you not to fault him. Like, whatever's going on with him, he only got sober right before he met you, and now he's in a really difficult relationship, and I just urge you to go to Al-Anon for his sake, first of all, to understand that what's going on with him related to his disease of alcoholism and or addiction is something he doesn't have total power over. He can't fix it so that you will be happy. In fact, the more that you're unhappy and you're hard on him, it's probably making it even harder for him. And I urge you not to be that person who makes it harder with your expectations. This is what's so hard about being with an alcoholic or an addict. It just seems like if they loved you, they would get it together and they would just do the proper, tidy up after themselves, wake up at a normal time, celebrate an anniversary. But there are real problems here. And so people can't be forced to go through the motions of like being normal and happy when they're not feeling normal and happy. So the job in this situation is to face and accept what is about this relationship. I don't doubt that you have some love for him, but you're holding him to a standard that was once in your mind, that was once in the past. This business sounds like a real bummer, and I have no idea what the details are, and there are people who you can confide in who can maybe help with that. There is also a 12-step program called Debtors Anonymous, and I would really encourage you to check that out. If, you sound like you qualify for like all the 12-step programs, or at least 3. And I would prioritize the substance abuse. I feel worried about the amount of stress you're in and how unhappy you are, given that you have a history of addiction. That's a really slippery slope to be on, and I just want you to be completely held in a group of people and or with professional help who understand that this is what you're going through and can support you to stay the path of sobriety. This is kind of where people go down. Don't let that happen to you. Maybe the marriage is going to go to the side. The business will one day be gone sooner or later, and you will have your life ahead of you. But for that to go well, you're going to need your sobriety. So put that first. Debtors Anonymous, Al-Anon, those programs, those are places where for free, I know, see, because I'm hearing money is the problem here. There's no money, and that's okay. You don't need money to get help. You need willingness, and you need, real willingness, not just like I went for a while, and then I tried this, and then I called for a couple weeks. It has been hard for people to get therapy lately. There's a bit of a shortage. I think it's slightly getting better. There's online therapy, but there's free 12-step groups, and that just whatever it takes so that each day you have support, be willing to do that. That is what it takes to get out of a pickle like you describe. I've been in some very bad circumstances before, and I'm telling you nothing less than what I did for myself. And I'm so glad I did it, and my only regret is that I waited so long to get serious about it, to give it my all. I suppose it's worth a try sometimes. You just think, well, maybe if I just do this much, because it's inconvenient, right? to have to get into recovery and work on yourself. You just kind of want to carry on, but it's time to give it your all, to put your heart into it, to make it the first priority in your life. I think when you're doing that, more clarity about your relationship will come and more support to decide what to do about the business. It just sounds like you want to be out of that marriage, you want to be out of that situation. And so in addition to addressing your sobriety, I encourage you to make the transition, whatever that looks like, so that you have a job and you are earning your own income once again. Because that's what a person needs if they're going to leave a relationship, is they need money. They need money, all right? That's just a practical thing. So if you're avoiding that transition of making money, it's like a very big thing holding you down in your current situation. So be brave about that. Be brave, get the support you need to take positive steps to move in that direction. The sending articles, feeling angry, you can let that go. You don't need to send any more articles. Right now, I would say, as you work on figuring yourself what your next moves are and preparing yourself to make them, that you be as kind as possible. You stay safe. Like, he rages at things. You didn't say anything where he rages at you. I hope he doesn't. It's time for one foot in front of the other. Self-care for you, Cassie. Self-care. Be as pleasant as you can. He's fragile too. I'm sure you care about his long-term well-being. And I hear you. You cry for hours sometimes, and you're tired of all the pain you've carried. Yes. So one thing that you can do, on top of all of the things I've suggested with the therapy and the 12-step programs, come be in our membership program. It's a beautiful community of people, many of whom are in transition with their relationships and work, and who support each other through the ups and the downs and the symptoms and the bad days and the good days through our CPTSD. That's what everybody has. So you'd be most welcome to come join the membership. You get access to all the classes. Hi, Anna. What do you do when you close the door on someone but they keep pursuing you? I'm trying to close the door on a toxic hot and cold relationship that's been ongoing for 10 months now. All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to be circling things I want to come back to, but right now I'm just going to read through Lauren's letter so I can see if I can help. All right. She says, you've heard it all before, I'm sure. I have CPTSD from my childhood. My father was pretty normal and kind, but my mother is severely autistic and suffered abuse as a child. She was an authoritarian parent, one who criticized heavily, lashed out emotionally, and was unable to regulate her own emotions, much less anyone else's. She also suffered from chronic migraines that made her bedridden for days on end, leaving us children to fend for ourselves while our dad was at work. Yet at times, my mother could also be incredibly warm and loving and present. The entire household operated depending on her health and her moods, and so we vacillated between the two extremes of hot and cold. Trauma bond, says Lauren. This gave me an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, she says, and that's someone who is fearful of abandonment, basically, which shows up in my romantic relationships again and again. 3 years ago, I joined a soccer team, and I met a guy I'll call Charlie, and immediately fell into limerence. Okay. We were both dating other people at the time. But I fantasized about us being together. A huge factor at play was how physically attractive I found him. Many of my female friends commented on how good-looking he was. My brain thought he was out of my league, far too good-looking for me. Finally, after some years, I was able to detangle myself from the super codependent relationship I'd been in. Charlie got dumped by the girl he was seeing. As soon as we were both single, he started pursuing me, and we hooked up. I had never had a casual hookup before, so I assumed that this was the start of us dating. It wasn't. We hooked up a few times after that, but his behavior was avoidant and unclear. I felt like I was chasing and he was running away. Finally, I asked him point blank what he was looking for, and he said he wasn't looking for a relationship at that time. So I told him we should go back to being friends, and he agreed. And then I suffered, that's right, 10 months of hot and cold behavior. I've read enough about dismissive avoidant attachment to think that we were absolutely in an anxious, preoccupied meets dismissive avoidant relationship. Okay, so she's framing that as attachment styles. It went like this. I would settle into us being just friends, but he would never leave it at just that, always flirting with me and pursuing me. Many times through the summer, we would sit on my front step and talk and drink until 3 a.m. I was so attracted to him, I told myself I would be fine just being friends with benefits. So sometimes I would try to initiate a physical relationship. Once at 3 a.m., I asked him point blank to kiss me, and he told me point blank, that is a bad idea. Okay. So not only would he not date me, he would also not sleep with me, and he wouldn't leave me alone. As soon as I would get sick of it and start to pull away, he would actively pull me back in. I thought him pulling me in was a green light, so I would start to lean in, and then he would pull away. So then I would pull away, and the cycle continued ad nauseum for months. I think we were both at fault for the dynamic. It takes two to tango. I have a deep abandonment wound, so whenever he would pull away or take extra long to reply to a text or flake on plans, I would go into that abandonment melange. That's the super intense abandonment depression that we go into, those of us who were abandoned as kids, and feel like my entire world was ending. Being rejected felt so shameful and made me attack myself. The couple of times he left me on red or didn't show up for plans, it consumed my thoughts and my energy. And I obsessed about it and really tore myself apart for being clingy and embarrassing myself. She puts those in quotes. My response to perceived rejection, him taking too long to text back or not showing up for coffee, was to hit the eject button, like the time that I dramatically returned all his stuff to his house in the middle of the night, or engaged in emotional abuse by threatening to break it off over and over again. I must have had the breakup conversation with him about 6 or 7 times, giving him countless ultimatums and pressuring him to either commit or quit. Sometimes I would go out with other people and watch as it made Charlie jealous. That was when he pursued me the hardest and pursued me the hardest and drunkenly told me he loved me and had sex with me. It was because he had seen me out on a date with another man. I knew at this time that I had earned his love in the shittiest way possible, but it still felt good. His dismissive, avoidant tendencies meant he rarely gave me compliments, didn't treat me or buy me anything, and wouldn't verbalize how he felt about me. But when he was jealous, he did. In December, things changed. He started acting like my boyfriend, buying me food, taking me out on dates, texting me every day, being sweet verbally, spending more nights together. I was scared to ask him what we were in case he rejected me again. And so I decided to just accept the change in his behavior and see where it went. Then he got wasted on New Year's Eve and slept with a stranger. I didn't know about it. Over the next month, he consumed himself with guilt and shame and pulled away from me. We started our toxic cycle of me threatening to leave and him winning me back all over again. Things were bad again, but I didn't know why. In February, I really started to pull away. He started getting blackout drunk every single weekend and sleeping with his ex, which I was also in the dark about. As far as I knew, we were still dating, sort of. He never once gave our relationship a label, no matter how I pressured him. So I wasn't even sure if dating was the word. He told me he wanted desperately to meet and talk about our relationship, and I agreed. He stood me up. Apparently, he was too afraid to face me and admit that he'd been sleeping around. It felt like a slap in my face. I blocked him on everything. This tore him apart, and my friends told me about him showing up to soccer blackout drunk and doing other dramatic attention-grabbing behaviors. After a week of me avoiding him, I ran into him on the street. He looked so shattered that my wall broke down, and I immediately fell into his arms. He was shaking and very emotional. We talked everything out, and it was the greatest conversation ever. He came clean about everything and was so deeply ashamed of himself and his substance abuse and was talking about going to therapy and being better. I didn't forgive him, but I didn't attack him either. I listened and told him that I cared about him, but for my own protection, I would need us to be just friends again. And that I would never, ever let him hurt me like that again. I have never felt so close to anyone in my whole life. Interesting. Okay. We cried and told each other I love you for the first time. I know Charlie loves me deeply. We hadn't meant to hurt each other. It was just our dynamic, but I can also see outside the limerence and know that love isn't ever going to change anything. Our wounds and trauma rub up against each other in exactly the wrong way and send us both spiraling down toxic pathways. I'm currently doing the work on myself to change, but I don't believe Charlie is ready to do the work. Now we're back to being friends. But because of our soccer team, we're always in each other's orbit, and I feel like my vision flickers between reality and fantasy. Sometimes I'm crystal clear about the reality of the situation and know he's a dead end and I don't obsess about him or engage with him. But anytime I'm in a vulnerable place, I want to dip back into that fantasy. And despite my putting up a boundary, he's still pursuing and flirting with me just like he always has, trying to get my attention. And sometimes it works. Sometimes we all go out for drinks and I avoid Charlie for the first hour. But he knows exactly what to say and what to do to pull me back in, and suddenly I'm flirting with him at a party, and I feel the cycle starting all over again. I'm not sure whether I need to strengthen myself internally or try to willpower myself to a place of distance and safety, or whether I need to put up practical boundaries like quitting the soccer team, or not going out for drinks if he'll be there, or blocking his number. I don't want to do any of those things because I love soccer and all of our mutual friends, and I don't want to pull away from any of that. I also heard from a friend that Charlie is in agony, trying to read my mixed signals right now. Now I'm doing to him what he always did to me, playing hot and cold. I can't imagine what it feels like for him, living in limbo, not knowing whether he has a chance with me or whether that door is closed. Actually, I can imagine, she says. I lived that reality for 10 months. Please help me close the door. Thank you so much for reading. Best, Lauren. Okay, Lauren, I can definitely help on this one. Here we go. All right. So you say, what do you do when you close the door on someone but they keep pursuing you? So Lauren, you've never tried that yet. You have never closed the door on this guy. I'm just going to bust you right here. That door remains open with this pretense that you can just be friends. All right? This is going to be a little bit of tough love because I know it's making you miserable. I know what it's like to be in this type of relationship, and I know it's not going to turn out well. All right? So the longer you keep telling yourself that you have actually set up some kind of meaningful boundary, but he just keeps doing this thing, the longer you're going to be unhappy and unavailable for an actual relationship. So let's go through. I'll show you what I saw here. So in your childhood, your mother was severely autistic and suffered abuse as a child, and she was authoritarian, and she had chronic migraines, bedridden. You've had to fend for yourself. She'd be loving and present, and then her mood would get terrible. And there it is. There's where you got stamped with your trauma bond flavor. And the worst thing, our trauma as kids can turn into something that draws us in as adults to the point that I would say that the game of cat and mouse is actually erotic for you, all right? This thing where somebody draws you in, rejects you, draws you in, gives you a heightened emotional experience every time they take you back, that it's addictive. It's just addictive, and I know, and so many people who write to me have this. It's not your fault. It's not your fault you have this, but it's a terrible way to live your life. It's just as miserable as if you had a problem with alcohol or drugs, all right? So let's go through here. So it was 3 years ago, you joined a team, you met the guy, and immediately fell into limerence. So you had a fantasy. You were both dating other people at the time, so I guess you weren't that into the guy you were with, but you fantasized about being together. And it's a lot because he was good looking. Okay, this is a lot where my theory that it's an eroticization is. He just looks really good. He's really mean. He gives you that feeling that he doesn't want you, and then he takes you back in and, this is what your mom did. This is what your mom did to you. And I know what it's like. I had an alcoholic mom, and so she would be just like totally unavailable. And then on some days she'd feel guilty, or she was temporarily sober or whatever, and she would just like give it all. And it was like so delicious, to be taken back in like that. I know. And I've had my experience with relationships like this, where it is just so exciting when they take you back and there's a little bit of hope. It's never full hope. It's never just like flat out actual hope. It's like a little bit of hope and they take it away, and a little bit of hope and they take it away. Okay, and then you did something interesting and turned the tables later, but I'll get to that. So you got out of the super codependent relationship you'd been in. Okay, so you've self-diagnosed as codependent, in the past at least, and he got dumped. Well, that's for, interesting. I mean, somebody's got to get dumped in a relationship that ends, right? But now we know, now we have an inkling of why, right? As soon as we were both single, he started pursuing me and we hooked up. All right, so this is I'm just going to sort of keep focusing on language where you keep sort of putting the ball in. He pursued you. He pursued you, so you hooked up. So you'd never had a casual hookup before, so you assumed that it was the start of dating, and it wasn't. You hooked up a few more times after that, but his behavior was avoidant and unclear. All right, let's talk about that. And you said, I felt like I was chasing and he was running away. Finally, I asked him point blank what he was looking for, and he said he wasn't looking for a relationship at that time. So I told him we should go back to being friends, and he agreed. All right. So just like Crappy Childhood Fairy rule number 1 for people with attachment wounds like you, I'm sorry to tell you this, you can't go back to just being friends. When you have a torrid, limerent trauma bond with somebody, there is no friendship there. All right. A friend is not somebody who treats you like that, who leaves you confused, feeling jerked around, neglected, abandoned. That's not what a friend is. It's a construct that you're making. I'm just kind of going to name it here. You're making this pretense that by not sleeping with him, you can have a relationship. But be honest. You know you're hoping he's going to come around. And that's just not a friendship. And so any relationship between exes where there's any kind of energy on either side, that hoping for sex, hoping they're going to come around, hoping it's really going to work out because it's true love, that is going to doom your emotional availability. And because he's demonstrated such a lack of consistency and sincerity towards you already, as much as you kind of like lift him, elevate what he's doing into something a little better than I see it, yeah, he doesn't treat you well. He's not your friend and he's not your boyfriend. So what is he here? So you had hot and cold behavior. You said you've read enough about dismissive avoidant attachment that you think you were in an anxious preoccupied, that would be you, fearful of abandonment, chasing, meets dismissive avoidant. Yeah, that might be true, but you say relationship, but you guys have a small R relationship, so it's not uncommon that somebody who's anxious and clingy is chasing after somebody who's just, very aloof and cold. That's not uncommon, but it's not happy. And what I understand about it is, unless two people are going to meet in the middle on it, where the avoidant person has some latitude, but the fearful, anxious person has some commitment they can count on, no, it's just miserable. It's just miserable. And I know it's, you are, so you wouldn't be writing. Okay. So you said it goes like this. I would settle into us just being friends, but he would never leave it at just that. So if you would be friends, he would start to flirt again. So a little bit, Lauren, didn't you notice how you actually had a lever in this whole thing? That if you said, I'm not going to sleep with you anymore, I just want to be friends, he would start to flirt with you. He would get jealous about everything else you did. He would start to move toward you, which is what you always wanted. But here's the thing. If you have to jerk somebody around and hurt them to make them want you, it's never going to be, it's just not love. It's not love. It's a trauma thing. It's a form of kink, really. I get letters about this not infrequently, where one person is, in love with the other one, and the other one is only there if they're pulling away, and then they're gone, and comes back if they're pulling away. That's the feeling the other person likes. It's like the little cat toy is getting pulled away. It's getting pulled away, and so they run and they grab it. But they don't actually want it. They don't actually want the toy. They don't actually want a relationship. They like the feeling of pursuit. They like the feeling of, I'm going to get abandoned, and then pursuing. So a little bit, when you start talking, well, okay, I'm going to talk about this because I see that you kind of learned how this goes on your side, and you can assess for yourself. Okay. So many times through the summer, you'd sit on the front step and talk and drink until 3 a.m. I was so attracted to him, I told myself I'd be fine just being friends with benefits. Did you tell yourself that? Well, when you're in love with somebody, you're not going to be fine with being friends with benefits. I think you got that. You were friends with benefits. What sort of kept messing up the relationship is it wouldn't turn into more than that, right? So sometimes you would try to initiate something. You asked him to kiss you and he said it's a bad idea. So there's one moment where he was showing some better judgment. It was a bad idea. Do you know why? This is the painful part. Because he wasn't into you in that way. So some people are perfectly happy to have friends with benefit sex, but they're not into you. And he had known you well enough at that point that, I know it's painful, right? But I know you know this is what it is, but you're just trying to, like the anxious avoidant thing, you're like, maybe there's a psychological explanation. Maybe it's just a trauma injury, but he's just not that into you. And he also sounds like a whole basket of problems as you sort of get into what ended up happening. So even if he were into you, not a great match here. So not only would he not date you, but he also wouldn't sleep with you, and he wouldn't leave you alone. So yeah, it won't date, won't sleep with. He actually didn't want to be romantic with you. So he did, he was willing to do that to stay friends. But you couldn't, that we can't help who we fall in love with. We can't help who we're attracted to. So at least you were honest. You were just coming from where you were. But the part where you got dishonest is where you promised that you guys could just be friends or just friends with benefits, or that you would stay friends, and you were really firm about that. That was an experiment, I would say. You were experimenting to see how that felt for you and how he reacted to it. But there's only ever been one thing you wanted out of this. You wanted to be with him for real. There's no shame in that, but it's not to be, okay? So you say you're both at fault for the dynamic, for sure. You have a deep abandonment wound, And so every time he would take a long time to reply to a text or flake, or, you would go into abandonment melange. It's horrible, isn't it? And I know what that's like, because abandonment melange, it's this phenomenon. Pete Walker named it. For somebody who was abandoned as a kid, when there's something that triggers that old wound, this intense toxic cocktail of grief, rage, panic comes up, and it feels like the end of the world. And that's literally the words you used. The world was ending. Those are the words you used. And then being rejected feels shameful, and made you attack yourself. I totally understand. So he would do that. He'd leave you on red, and it would consume your thoughts. So that's what obsession is like. That's what relationship addiction is like. It just absolutely consumes you. It stops you in your tracks. And, just gently, I want to invite you, when we finish this letter, to just do some reflection on, like, what has it cost you to have all that life force of yours go into something that just is a drain? It never pans out into the relationship you want. You've tried every permutation of how you can accept how it is, make do with it, date somebody else, but it's not flying, is it? That's the nature of love, and it's sad but real that, there comes a time when you actually do have to close the door. And you said you wanted to do that. Oh yeah. You tore yourself apart for being clingy. You felt that you embarrassed yourself. So a lot of shame in being neglected. Totally normal. It's actually not shameful. It's okay. You say you engaged in emotional abuse by threatening to break it off over and over again. And, I do call people out on that sometimes. If you're actually in a committed relationship and you keep threatening them that you're going to leave, but you don't mean it, that is emotional abuse. But I think when somebody's just having hookups with you and sleeping with other people and lying, that you threatening to leave, I wouldn't call it emotional abuse. I just call it like an attempt to set a boundary that you weren't totally able to hold. Okay, you weren't able to honor it because your love for him was so great, your need for him was so great, you would abandon yourself. That's what it is. I'm not getting the feeling that was emotional abuse. So you had that breakup conversation with him 6 or 7 times. You gave him ultimatums, pressuring him to commit or quit. And then you loved watching him get jealous, and that's when he would pursue you the hardest. And then he drunkenly told you he loved you and had sex with you. And yeah, because he saw you out on a date. I think he's a very hurt and messed up person, very wounded. And a lot of this stuff is just coming out of pure unhealed wounds. And then it goes on all this blackout drinking and drunken behavior and just total abandonment of you and lying. And I think maybe when you hear me read this out loud, you're just going to go, oh, wow, he's like not actually what I thought. He is, I think, using you for friendship and security in the measure that he wants in the given moment, considering what else is going on in his life. But a little bit like we do, you're psychologizing it. And you say his dismissive avoidant tendencies meant he rarely gave me compliments, didn't treat me or buy me anything, and wouldn't verbalize how he felt about me. But he was jealous. When he was jealous, he did. Okay, so you say dismissive avoidant, I say dishonest. If he loved you He would verbalize his feelings. He would buy you things. He would just do the normal couple things if he loved you and was worried that you were going to leave. I don't think he was that worried. I think the jealousy activates a reflex in him that, you know, it's very convenient for him that you're emotionally and sexually available if he just pursues you, right? I know, it's hard to hear. Sometimes people go, gosh, Anna, you don't have to be so mean. But I don't want to be mean. It's out of like, I know I've been through this, and I just want to tell you the truth so that you can really shut the door, so that you can abandon hope, because it's the false hope that, you know, he's going to change. So this is where your childhood trauma really kicks in when it got dire. So when you started to really pull away, he started getting blackout drunk every single weekend. He started sleeping with his ex, didn't tell you. And you thought you were still sort of dating. You know, if you're still sort of dating somebody, and I don't know, don't sort of date anybody. Date them. Date them and see if they're the one for you. I know you don't want to be in this sort of entanglement. He never once gave the relationship a label, no matter how you pressured him. So I wasn't even sure if you were dating. I don't think so. If someone's dating you, they can call it dating. If there's resistance to labeling it, they are not. It's just not that. It's, I don't know. You could interpret the word dating any way you want, but the way that you're talking about, no, he's not doing that. He told me he wanted desperately to meet and talk about the relationship. You agreed, and he stood you up. So there you have it. You say apparently he was too afraid to face you and admit that he'd been sleeping around. You say apparently. I'm not sure that's what it was. I just think it was just purely shitty treatment of somebody who doesn't really care about your feelings and is sleeping around and maybe thought for a minute they should talk to you, or maybe, I'm just challenging you, Lauren. Why on earth would you want to have another day of this? You deserve so much better. All right. So you blocked him, you tore him apart, and friends told you that he would show up at soccer blackout drunk and do dramatic things. But see, this is weird. This is where the little cat who chases the toy got activated in you. It's like, really? He got that sad about me? I know. So it was like, okay, something real happened, something emotional happened and registered that you weren't just completely nothing to him. And I get it. All right. So after a week of you avoiding him, you ran into him on the street and you say, he looked so shattered that my wall broke down and I immediately fell into his arms. Okay, there's your old codependent thing. The guy looks shattered. And so, oh, I love him. A guy who's cheated and abandoned and lied and all that stuff, just because he's shattered and gets blackout drunk all the time, that the codependent thing in you that got formed when you were a little kid with your mom's like off-on behavior, it's that magical thinking that it's like, he's shattered because his heart has finally cracked open. And I totally see why you thought that, because he came clean about all his terrible behavior and cheating and substance abuse. And you say, I didn't forgive him, but I didn't attack him either. Okay. And I listened and told him I cared about him, but for my own protection, I'd need us to just be friends again. Okay, there's your fatal mistake. He's not your friend, and he's not capable of being your friend. He's a person who hurts you every time you get involved with him, and your life force drains out. A friend is somebody who builds you up. A friend is somebody where as a result of spending time with them, you become a better person. They get you. They care about things that are hurtful to you. They've got your back. So this is not your friend. So really, like, sometimes when we say that, we're going to have to just be friends. We're hoping we could turn the dial down on the intensity, but still keep the romantic possibilities intact, like a bookmark, right? And it totally makes sense. And there are cases in human history where it's worked. But even if he were madly in love with you, the stuff going on in his life right here, even if he were begging you to be with him and it was all he ever wanted, what's going on in his life right here means he really can't do it. Certainly not now. And if somebody has problems of this magnitude, I would say wait 10 years to even entertain the possibility, to see if they've had a huge change. These are serious problems, and he's not working on them. And so you said you would never, ever let him hurt you like that again. So that sounds really good, right? You don't have the power. When it gets this bad, we become powerless to not get hurt again, to not get entangled again. So big steps are required. You say you know he loves you deeply, and in his weird, mean way, yes, maybe. You hadn't meant to hurt each other. No, he was just kind of selfishly pursuing what he wanted. It was just our dynamic. Yeah, you can see that love isn't ever going to change anything, and your wounds and trauma rub up against each other in exactly the wrong way and send you both spiraling down toxic pathways. You know, I'm not aware, there's nothing in your letter that tells me that you're the one sending him on a toxic pathway. He's on a toxic pathway, and you're codependently yoked to him. Kind of, you've hitched your wagon to his star, and his star is just going into the black hole. So, what can you do? My metaphor sort of leads you there. It's time to unhitch. You say, I'm currently doing the work on myself to change. I challenge you. I don't think you are yet. I think you're looking for the easier, softer way, as they say in 12-step literature, but you don't believe he's ready to do the work. No, when you'll know that he's ready to do the work when he's done the work and he comes to you and he's like, all he ever does is the work, and he's like sober, he is single, he is honest, he's full of, structured, positive, contrite conversations to have with you. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I wouldn't settle for anything less. And even then, a lot of times somebody will get sober and want to make some changes. And then in the first few months, 6 months, 1 year, they want to get together again with somebody who they had that connection with. And the connection itself, because it's inherently rocky because of all you've been through, will be very destabilizing for them and actually dangerous for them. And honestly, if you love this guy, set him free to go work on himself if he does. I mean, he's either going to self-destruct or he's going to work on himself. But the last thing he needs is any codependent energy about, if he would just get his life together, the thing between you would be happy. Like, I really, having been through this before, having my brother and 2 partners die of drugs, and the partners, while they were my partner, I'm just speaking from experience. The right thing to do is to detach and let them do their best. Being in a dramatic relationship is the worst thing for them, okay? It's dangerous. Now, time to focus on you, because you have been in danger yourself. Your life, your future, all your happiness, you're in danger. I don't think it's immediately life-threatening to you, but it's bad. And so detachment's going to get you back out of that. You say that you're always in each other's orbit because of the soccer, and sometimes you're clear about the reality, and then sometimes you flicker back into fantasy. Yeah, it works that way. And it'll work that way so long as you have contact with him, honey. It's a tough road. So breaking contact, getting support from women who understand or maybe are walking the same path with you. You could go to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. You could go to ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Other Dysfunctional Families. This type of relationship thing. You could come into my dating program or dating coaching with me or my team. This is what we work on. We help people come back to reality, and we do that with practical tools that help keep taking you out of the fantasy and back into the delicious truth of reality. It's actually quite good and comforting. Do you ever get that where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just pursuing a ghost here. That feels good. It's a good feeling. And to be surrounded by people who support you and they're like, yay, good job. Good job, Lauren. You did it. You stand up for yourself, and you go, guess what? I bought myself a new dresser today and I put it together myself. And everybody's like, yay, yay. And you help each other put your furniture together, and you go out to outings on the weekend together, and you start to have a life that's only based on friendship and positive growth, and none of this destructive emotional vampirism that's been going on with you and this guy. You say that sometimes you go out for drinks. He's got this blackout drink thing, and he says he loves you, and sometimes you go out for drinks, and then you ignore him for an hour. Now you're playing with him, all right? You know that that's what sets him off. And then you go back and you get sucked back together through drinks and ignoring each other. And I just want to say, I suggest to you, even if you don't have a problem with alcohol, while you're healing this problem, I would suggest don't drink alcohol. Don't do mind-altering stuff. Somebody said this to me when I was struggling, and they just said, you have no business drinking alcohol. And I was like, what? But I'm not an alcoholic. But it's true. It's really hard to stay with your better judgment. It's hard to eat the food that you know is good for you. It's hard to keep the bedtime you know is good for you. It's hard to keep the boundaries you know are good for you. And it's hard to stay out of beds where you don't belong when there's alcohol involved. And since he, I don't know if you know this, but alcoholism, which he appears to have, and it's taking him down a mental health bad rabbit hole, can be fatal. And so I don't know, I just urge you, don't participate in that with him. Anyway, I'm really sorry about the soccer team, but yes, I would leave the soccer team. And I know that's not fair, but you recovering and getting your life together is more important than this group of friends and this thing you enjoy. And I just know you can find another team, another activity, another group of friends if that's necessary. Be willing to go to any lengths, because I'm telling you, what you have now is a full-fledged addiction that's taking you down. So take it seriously. Okay, that's my suggestion to you, Lauren. The last thing you told me is that your friends say he's in agony trying to read your mixed signals. Stop playing the game. Don't give him signals. No contact. Yes, block. No contact. And you're going to still think about him. Stuff is going to remind you of him, and you put it out of your mind. There's a lot of tools. Like, I teach my daily practice, and that's one way you can be processing these feelings. Maybe you're in therapy or you're thinking of doing that. Everything you can do to stay on the path. Don't go down your bad rabbit hole of like, maybe if I could just have contact with him. The way an addict just thinks, just this one time, I want to do the drug again. That's my suggestion to you. And you said, please help me close the door. And that's what I'm saying. Actually do it. No more contact. No more contact with this source of toxic miserableness for you, Miss Lauren. You're going on to good places, all right? Hi, Anna. I am currently in a relationship with a man/man-child. I've got my pencil here. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to. Let's read this all the way through, and I'll see if I can help you, Rebecca. All right. He's 23, and I'm 29, she says. He's had a really rough past and got through his addiction to drugs and such. He's been sober, but I feel like he isn't doing the work to heal or isn't seeking counseling to help. Our relationship was intense from the start. We talked and cuddled for hours for like the first week. I was excited, but there were so many red flags that I let slide. I honestly feel like this whole relationship, I have just been passive because it's hard to do what I know is best if there's emotions involved. I loved the feeling of somebody being so into me and the potential of our relationship. Fast forward a month. Besides the physical, we had nothing in common. He didn't ask me about myself, really. He didn't like to go out, didn't want to take a walk or spend time in nature, things that I loved. And when we hung out, it was mostly in silence. He would smoke and be on the phone. I felt invisible and frustrated, but he would hold my hand and give me affection, so I clung to that as proof of his love. He also had a dark sense of humor and made threatening jokes, but told me I was being too sensitive and I needed to toughen up. I've tried telling him how I felt because I've spent a lot of time trying to heal, and I value emotional connection. He didn't relate. He always made my feelings mean something about him and got really defensive and then shut down. My dilemma is, I know he's immature, but he's got good intentions and is trying to change and grow. He wants to support me, and I'm attracted to that provider characteristic. But I'm not getting what I need now, and I'm not sure if I can be in this relationship and continue to forego my needs with just faith that things will work out in the future. Am I accepting crumbs, punishing myself? I feel like this relationship isn't right, but I don't want to let go of the potential. Okay, Rebecca, gotcha. I think I can help. This is going to be a tough love fairy video, okay? It may not be what you wanted to hear. I guess you could say that you're accepting crumbs on this one, but what I'm hearing is that you are using somebody. You are using somebody on a fantasy about what you would like in a relationship that he cannot give you and has given no sign that he would. And I'm going to be very stern with you about this because of something you told me at the beginning, which is he got through his addiction to drugs and such. He's sober, but I feel like he isn't doing the work to heal or isn't seeking counseling or help. All right. As somebody who's had experience with addicts in my life in the most tragic way, I just want to say, if somebody is newly sober, you have no business having any kind of a relationship with them. That is not in their best interest. It's one thing if people have been together a long time and one partner gets sober and the longtime partner supports them and is in their life. That is one thing, and it's not even then, it's not always good for both people.
but you've been seeing him a month and you're putting all this energy and demand on him that he should turn around and meet your needs. He's a 23-year-old addict who's barely sober. What you describe is a sexual relationship. There's hot sex. That's what's going on here. There's no other sign of a relationship. He holds your hand a little bit, and you're connecting that in a crap fit fashion to a fantasy of having somebody be in a provider role of looking out for you. But that is not what's going on. A 23-year-old freshly sober person who's not doing the work on himself is honestly not in a position to give you that or make your life stable or make you feel loved. They need to put first things first. They need to deal with their sobriety. And he may or he may not be doing that right now, but I'm telling you, honey, you do not want to be the one who pressured him into a bad place with the demand that he turn into some kind of boyfriend for you. That's not what's going on. And so what you don't tell me, but I can read between the lines, is you had your own trauma. I can tell right now you were seriously neglected, that you even have the capacity to think of yourself as like, oh, this is such a great potential relationship. It's not a potential relationship. Even if somebody were the right age and in a stable place, I would always caution people, don't fall in love with the potential of somebody. The potential of somebody is your fantasy of how they should be. And there is nothing worse for another human being than coming in and imposing a picture on them of how you think they should be. He is where he is. He's on his path of where this is taking him. I hope he survives. You know, addiction is an extremely serious problem. This part where you say you're worried that he isn't doing the work to heal or seeking counseling to help, that is your inner cry for help, that you need to be doing your work. You need to be getting the counseling. You need to be focusing on what's going on in your life, that at the age of 29, you're getting together with a 23-year-old who has nothing to give emotionally, who you have nothing in common with. All right, that is where your pain is coming from. So it's totally natural. I've been there. I know what it's like to just kind of, you know, you just end up in some sexual relationship and then you're just like, oh no, this isn't really anything that I wanted. So then you try to make the other person change. It's a losing strategy. It's not love. And I told you this would be tough love, but when we try to change other people like that to fit some need that we have, it's not love, it's selfishness. And it's not good for them. And this is not, yeah, you're saying like the first week it was so intense, but all relationships where there's a sexual attraction are intense in the first week. If the lights have gone out in a month, you know, sweetie, there's nothing going on here. I think the integrity path is to very lovingly step out of this relationship and go support yourself in healing from whatever happened to you, that you would be in this sort of like, it is a breadcrumb situation, but it's also a vampire situation where you're, you know, trying to feed a fantasy you have about somebody really loving you and caring about you from somebody who's extremely vulnerable and could be in great danger from his addiction. So that's my tough love for you, Rebecca. I hope you do that. We have a lot of resources here at Crappy Childhood Fairy for people who are trying to do that brave step of stepping out of the unhealthy thing and to create a safe and nutritious pause where you can work on your stuff. It could start with the free course, The Daily Practice. I hope you'll take it. Anybody watching, it's always down in the description section. You'll find it on the free tools page of my website. And you can learn the techniques that I use to start healing and, you know, start feeling better today. Start filling in that pain and angst that makes it necessary to keep pursuing it from somebody else. Sometimes healing these things, it takes some time, but the first thing you need is a way to feel better right away. All right. So I wish you well. I hope that goes well, and I hope he stays safe. And if you're interested in learning about what are the signs that somebody is a good partner, I'm not advocating, Rebecca, that you go out and look for a good partner. I'm advocating that you become a good partner to start with, all right? And then start looking for somebody who matches you. Hello, Anna. I've been dating my boyfriend for a year now. We're both 62 years old, previously married, and neither of us have children. We met online through Match and then in person. We had a very romantic first meeting under a giant Christmas tree. It was fun and exciting. He kept using the word magical, which I now cringe at. He told me he loved me within 24 hours of meeting. He purchased personalized license plates that said his name and my name forever within 6 weeks of meeting. I told him he was moving way too fast and I was a little freaked out, but I was really enjoying our time together, so I ignored the obvious red flags. I hoped he'd lighten up in his intensity as we got to know each other. I believed him to be genuinely kind, loyal, and funny, which I feel are hard qualities to find in a man these days. I'm going to circle that with the fairy pencil and come back to that. I'll read Sherry's letter all the way through. I'm going to circle things that I want to make sure that I discuss in particular when I respond to this letter. All right, let's read it all the way through. So, she says, I continued to see him. We both have a history of getting in relationships too fast. I did not have a crappy childhood, but he did. His mother was cruel and both emotionally and physically abusive. My family has some emotional dysfunction, but overall I had a happy childhood. It's very obvious that he has CPTSD, though, which I learned of when I went searching for help 2 months into our relationship. But I knew it wasn't my job to fix him. 2 months into dating, I came down with COVID and wound up in the intensive care unit in critical condition for 11 days. He also became ill, but refused to go to the doctor, so he stayed at my condo to care for my cats while I was in the hospital. I was very grateful for that, but at the same time concerned that he didn't seem to care for himself. He's very comfortable in victim or martyr roles. When I got out of the hospital, I wasn't the feisty woman he met under the tree, and he accused me of talking to somebody else while in ICU because he felt I wasn't the same. I sent him home. I was still very ill, and my focus was on getting better. He actually said he thought we would have this magical moment when they wheeled me out of the hospital. What? She says. I barely knew my name after being in the intensive care unit and near death. It was an extremely traumatic experience for me, and all he wanted was magic. I was appalled. Yeah. After that, I told him I couldn't continue to see him unless he got help. I connected him with a local therapist, and he did go consistently for a couple of months, but like you speak of in your videos, it made him worse. He found himself sobbing and completely dysregulated after a session and with no tools to deal with the emotions that were coming up. That's when I introduced him to your videos. Later, we purchased your dating and relationship course. I was impressed by his desire to be healthier, even though traditional therapy wasn't for him. I really felt compassion for him and was sad he had been through so much. I had hope he'd become more aware of why he had such negative behaviors and address them. I listened to your video for those of us who are in relationships with CPTSD partners. I gave him more patience and time than I normally would because of it. I have belonged to Al-Anon for over 16 years, worked the steps, and have a sponsor who feels he isn't good for me. I've also gone to traditional therapy as needed since my 30s. I have my own share of complex PTSD from being married 22 years to a diagnosed narcissist. I know I'm slipping back into my codependency, which I've worked so hard to be better at. My boyfriend feels my boundaries, like don't yell, are mean. He doesn't have any friends that he does things with. He'll speak of close friends, but I've never met one in an entire year. He focuses on me all day long, consistently tells me he misses me, and gets upset if I don't say it back to him. I've listened to hours upon hours of your videos. My hope was to help guide him to resources so we could have a less drama-filled relationship. That's all I want. I don't expect to be perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect. I have my issues too, but he is wearing me out. I'm finding I resent him. I'm feeling I don't want to tell him I love him or miss him because he constantly wants it. He can be very passive-aggressive and guilts me for not feeling like him, and that makes me angry now. I don't want to feel like him. I don't feel he's healthy, yet here I am still hoping. Who's the unhealthy one, LOL? I do have to say he has gained more awareness of his behavior through your videos and course just since the summer. I have seen changes in him. He's doing daily writing, but he still hangs on to the magical thinking and is obsessed with me. If things don't feel magical every day, he wants to know what's wrong. I spend 4 out of 7 days with him, and he still pouts when I want time for the things in my life outside of him. He doesn't do anything outside of us, which I know is so unhealthy. He calls this love. I'm also dealing with my mom, who was just put into memory care with Alzheimer's. Even when he knows I'm sitting with her, he wants to hear from me, and that feels controlling.
Although he loves me like no other in so many ways, which is nice, the downside of his personality is just draining and disturbing sometimes. I'm growing to resent him and have lost respect. If I even mention us breaking up or that I need time away from him, he starts crying. I've never seen a man cry so much in my entire life. Is this normal for a man with CPTSD? I don't mind him sharing his emotions and I don't mind him crying, but a man who sobs every week is too much. I really do love the kind, regulated boyfriend I met. I'm sad to think of him not being in my life, but his neediness is so unattractive and exhausting. When it's good, it's amazing, but when it's bad, well, you know, it's awful. I fear he'll harm himself if I break up. There it is. He's threatened this before. I feel ridiculous now for asking this, but could there be any hope for him at this stage of his life with his severity? Please help. Thank you for all that you do. All right, Sherry, I think I can help. This is a tough case, and I'm really glad you wrote this. Is gosh, I think I've been in both sides of this relationship before. Luckily, I'm on the other side to tell you how you get out of each side of it. All right. So you've been dating for a year now. You're 62 years old, previously married, no kids. Big romantic meeting after connecting online for the first time, and he said it was magical. He changed his license plates. So this, yeah, that is way too fast. He said he loved you within 24 hours of meeting, and you told him he was moving way too fast and you were freaked out, but you were really enjoying the time together, so you ignored the obvious red flags. Okay. And you hoped he'd lighten up, and you believed him to be genuinely kind, loyal, and funny, which I feel are hard qualities to find in a man these days. I just flagged that one because, you know, it's just so hard to find decent men or decent women out there these days. That is a trauma-driven belief that will keep you single. It may have been hard for you, but one of the reasons your relationships have been really unhealthy is because you're not healed yet. Sherry, when you're healed, you would never get together. You would never have had a second date with somebody who said he loved you in the first 24 hours, right? So you've actually been going into relationships with your own half of the, you know, unhealthy dynamic. And that's what's giving you the impression that there are no great men out there, because it's really easy to think like, I'm fine. If I would just meet the right guy, if he were just healthy, everything would be great. There must be no guys like that. They are out there, but they're not dating people with that energy. And they're not dating people who have been in a relationship for the past year because you're already taken, all right? So I want you to put that idea out of your mind that there's no men who are kind and loyal and funny. Not so. And then you both have a history of getting into relationships too fast. You didn't have a crappy childhood, but he did. His mother was cruel and both emotionally and physically abusive. Okay, that's a recipe for his behavior. So it's very obvious to you that he has complex PTSD, which you learned when you went searching for help 2 months into the relationship. Okay, big red flag is when you or anybody is searching for help for your partner within 2 months of dating them. The red flag is you. And yes, it's a red flag that they're so screwed up that you feel that this is necessary. But the red flag is that rather than going, okay, dating is to find out if this person is appropriate for me to date, and then to act as if you're their spouse and you've been with them for years and suddenly they're acting strange. It's not like that. You're seeing how it is. The act of searching for somebody else online for how to help them is inherently codependent, except if you're married to somebody, basically. I know there are exceptions and everybody will go, wait, but you get my idea here. Searching for help, giving them books, courses, any of that stuff is codependently trying to make them be an idea of them that you would like to have, that you originally had, because I don't think there's any other reason why we do that, because we're scared to leave, because we can't deal with our own feelings about leaving. So you're scared of hurting him, but I'm going to wager you're also scared of how you will feel out of a relationship. You know, when you've wanted one for a long time and you meet somebody and you think, I think this could be it. Oh, it's devastating when you just realize, no, it's not it. I have to go back to square one. I got to try again. And it's such a loss, right? And that loss can feel so big that you'll talk yourself into staying in a completely screwed up situation just so you don't have to deal with it. And I think sometimes we fix people as a coping mechanism. We just need to feel some kind of control over a situation that is totally
out of control and unworkable. 2 months into dating, you got COVID so bad you were near death. You were in critical condition in the hospital. And when you got out, he imagined there would be this magical meeting, and he was disappointed that you were too tired and still unwell to, deliver this magical experience. Okay, this is where it starts getting pretty sick, all right? This is like point 2, when I just feel like, you should not be here. This is not good. I couldn't continue to see him unless he got help. And then you connected him with a local therapist. So I just want to put out there to everybody, if anybody ever makes an ultimatum to somebody that they need to get help or you won't see them anymore, let them get help. Not you will make them get help and they'll show up. You will not be satisfied with your results with that. Now, again, I make a distinction. If somebody's in your family, if you have like a lifelong commitment to them, then sometimes there's a such thing as intervening and pushing and doing, trying to save somebody's life. But when you've been dating for 2 months, you don't go try to rescue somebody and make them go to therapy and go call around for them and do that, okay? So Sherry, this is where I think you're just kind of ruining your chances of happiness, is instead of seeing reality for what it is, you're trying to go in and fix it and make it into what you want. And from the outside, it's just like really evident, like, no, that's not going to work. Okay. He did go consistently for a couple months, but it didn't help him and he was just crying. Yeah. Take it from someone who has tried to make somebody go get help. And as many people who watch know, I've back in, like 16, 17 years ago, it was a relationship after my divorce that turned out to be somebody with a drug addiction. And I didn't know about it for a few months. And when I did find out about it, I was like you, I just couldn't really face what that meant, which was the end. It wasn't just any drugs, it was heroin, okay? I needed to go. I had children, like no way could I do this, but I was trying to like bargain with reality and go, but I tell you what, if you go to this kind of treatment and inpatient this and go to this many meetings and get a sponsor, then maybe we can make it work. Like I wanted it to work so bad. He didn't want to lose me, so he pretended he was doing all that stuff. And then I turned into that girl who goes around like following him around to see if his car was in the parking lot at the meeting, and it wasn't. And then I'd be all angry. And I never again want to be in that kind of like drama, because what I was trying to do was control him so that I could be okay. And that's what codependence is. Your guy is perfectly capable of seeking help. He can find a therapist if he wants a therapist. If you were serious with you have to get help or I'm not going to see you, and I think you're done with him, I hear that. But I'm just saying, for perspective, that wasn't a real ultimatum when you went in and tried to do it for him, okay? So if you had said that and then you had stepped out of the relationship, he could decide if he wanted to do it. Now, I think that people who are as fragile as him, and I think, yeah, he may have CPTSD, but I think he may have something more than that. And I would leave that diagnosis to I'm not a therapist. So those of you who are therapists or doctors out there, please weigh in on what you think that this guy is dealing with. But what I do know is it's not workable for a relationship. No way. This is not workable. You've just been dating. Okay. And you've stayed with him for 10 months after this meltdown, and that's really rough. Okay. So then you introduced him to my videos, which, he could go online and find them. Sometimes I say to people, like, go ahead and show them a video, let them figure it out. Once they know there's a video by me, and if they like it, they will watch more videos. They can take courses if they want. The dating course is not intended to be taken as a couple. I'm just saying the dating course is for people who are single, who would like to get into a committed relationship. So I appreciate that you bought the course, and that's nice. And I think that you taking the course is going to prepare you for what's next. But I think that somehow you didn't, like the lesson of the course could not penetrate your mind because you were already in a relationship that you needed to justify. And what my course tells you is you write down what you actually need. And I know you don't need somebody who can't even be present for you when you're sick because they're trying to get magic love from you. That is not on your list. I've already seen it. No, I haven't seen your list. But I want you to write that down, that you need somebody capable of being present who can actually care for you when you're sick. I want you to write down somebody who actually is capable of going slow enough to get to know you so that you can mutually find out if you should take little baby steps towards intimacy. Because for people with CPTSD, and for what you have, you may not have CPTSD, I don't know. But you have this thing of rushing in and trying to, crap fit to a relationship and through trying to control the person and retrofit them and make them into, like Pygmalion. I'm going to make you into the sort of person I could feel proud of and feel good with. And I'm not judging you. I've done it. I've done it more than once. But I'm just telling you, like, it's a terrible road to go down. Like, go back, stop now, come back. So then you said, I'm impressed by his desire to be healthier, even though traditional therapy wasn't for him. I don't know. Nothing in your story sounds like he wanted to be healthier. He just wanted you to not leave. But I won't speak for him. He didn't write. And you felt compassion and you were sad. He'd been through so much. Yeah, it is sad. You had hoped that he could be more aware of why he had such negative behaviors and address them. But I'll tell you what, even if somebody who's suffering symptoms like him, like, it is so much an inside job. And I'm going to be making a video very soon about that moment of clarity when you realize, oh my gosh, everything I've ever done on my own, and even with professional help, like, I haven't been able to break through my symptoms. And if I can't change, I'm never going to be okay. Like, if I had to get to that point where I would go to any lengths to recover and admit that I just, nothing I had ever tried had worked, and that it was going to somehow have to be bigger, even if I couldn't even conceive of what that was, that if that's what I needed, I think it's true for many. I think I would venture it's true for him. So you do people a disservice when you get in there and try to make their recovery go forward. It's true that by leaving somebody or suggesting something, sometimes that influences them. Sometimes leaving them, especially when they have that terror of abandonment that he's got, leaving them can sort of yank their chain and they will move around like a puppet, and do the thing that you're saying they have to do, but they can't sustain it. And that's what you're seeing. He doesn't actually want what you want for him. That's not where he is right now. And I can't really speak for who's capable of these things or why the miracle happens sometimes. Some people get lucky, but most of us, we really have to do the footwork to show up for the miracle, and other people trying to make it happen only slows that down. You say, I belonged to Al-Anon for over 16 years, so I think you know that logic about alcoholism, like meddling in people's alcoholism, trying to make them get into recovery, not letting them hit their natural bottom and have the dignity of problems, and then deciding for themselves what they want to do about those problems. Like, that is the way. That is the way. You can assist somebody, you can drive them, but you cannot make them do something. And the only situation where our culture permits us to make people do something is if they are, like, clearly a danger to themselves or others. And beyond that, people have a certain amount of choice, and there's a reason for that. It's important for people to choose that recovery is what they want right now. All right, so you've gone for 16 years, worked the steps, and you have a sponsor who feels he isn't good for you. Okay, so I'm just going to say it. Either you need stronger meetings or you need a stronger sponsor, because the way you're talking, I'm not hearing a consciousness of what is taught. And Al-Anon is not specifically about codependence, but it certainly helps. There's a 12-step program specifically for that. Al-Anon is incredibly powerful if you're with people who are completely in the solution. And so if you are going to the trouble of working the steps and having a sponsor, sponsors they're not your boss. They can't control you or anything, but obviously he's not good for you. And I would say, if you really feel that you're an Al-Anon and that you have the disease of Al-Anonism, then you're in a relapse right now. That's what's going on. So what does a person do about a relapse? They double down on the process of recovery. You go back and you read the literature. You go back and you call the sponsor every day. You go through the steps again, or, depending on how you do the steps, but you give it your all, just like you're wishing he would. Isn't that interesting? Like, everything you want him to do, I think it's a cry for help from within yourself, that you need to do that. I think you're in a position to possibly get faster, happier results because you want to get better. But the toxic belief you have is that if he would change, you would be okay. If you would change, you will stop having relationships like this. Okay? Yes, you might be alone for a while, but better alone than in this kind of like soul-sucking relationship that's just maddening. I like the feistiness you have, that it's making you resentful. I know what you mean about losing respect. I've had that happen, and I think when that happens, the relationship is over. And so I don't think you've done anything wrong by losing respect, but I just ask you to honor that feeling, like, stay with yourself here. This is not somebody that you have the respect for, and respect is critical to a good relationship. People must respect each other. It's totally important.
All right, this guy thinks your boundaries, like don't yell, are mean. So even that you're trying to like tell me about how unfair it is. It's like if somebody yells at, or if they're yelling at you and you're just like, don't yell, and they can't stop, you have to decide if you're willing to put up with that anymore. Boundaries are your willingness to act, not what you say, it's what you do. So if you say, don't yell, and they continue to yell and won't stop, it's just not a boundary, it's a request. And requests are legitimate, but if you actually want to not be yelled at, you would have to leave somebody who can't stop. And I know it's hard. I know with Al-Anonism and codependency and everything feels like a puzzle, and you keep thinking, well, maybe if I say this, he'll do that, and then I can do this. And, I just, from the outside, I would just say, wash your hands, wash your hands. Just say, I'm in a relapse right now. I got to get out of this drug. I got to get out, okay? He doesn't have any friends. He speaks of close friends, but you've never met one in a year, focuses on you all day long, gets upset. So I think there's something more than CPTSD going on here. I do. I don't know what you do about it. And like I said, I'm going to leave that to the professionals, but you don't know what to do about it either. And so this fantasy that you kind of have the solution if he will just follow it, let it go, girl, let it go. You're also dealing with your mom who was just put into memory care for Alzheimer's. And when he knows you're sitting there, he's trying to demand attention. Okay, I'm so sorry that's happening with your mom. And I think sometimes when something very scary and stressful and demanding is happening, the idea of leaving a relationship feels hard, but that's actually a very easy time to do it because you're needed right now. You're needed to help this transition of your mom. She is luckily in care, and then you can step out of that and you can get on with your life, your healing, your recovery, and your relationships, and your ability to have joy. So you say something here that is the same as what I hear again and again from many people who are in abusive relationships, and it's that when it's good, it's amazing, but when it's bad, well, it's awful. There's some version of that almost everybody in an abusive relationship says, because, there's a reason why we got together with these people who turn out to have this very bad side, all right? So yes, don't be fooled because it's good sometimes. The proof is in the pudding of how do you feel? You feel miserable. You feel drained, exhausted, disrespectful, just completely harried by this guy and afraid he'll harm himself if you leave. So that's called being a hostage. I do think what he's doing is abusive. It's emotional abuse to make threats to harm oneself if somebody leaves. I think sometimes people do that. They don't have their full faculties. They're not mentally well enough to take responsibility for what they're doing, but it is abuse. So I hope that helps you realize that you are being abused and you need to go, even if he can't help how he's behaving. One thing that you can do, because there is a concern that he would harm himself, and sometimes that is legitimate, is you can call a crisis line and ask them to guide you on the best way to do this. They will have experience, they will have professionals. You can alert them to who he is and what's going on. You can leave him with the phone number if you want. You can do the best a person who is not him can do and go save yourself.